COVID-19 apparently did not discourage some minority entrepreneurs from starting up new businesses during the height of the pandemic. A team of economists recently found several cities with predominantly Black populations that saw their rate of new businesses skyrocket. According to their research, Atlanta, Miami, New York City, and Houston led other cities in Black entrepreneurial growth. Many of these businesses were created in Black communities that earn higher than the average U.S. income. Startup growth in those neighborhoods outperformed their statewide averages. All this during a time when the U.S. economy saw widespread unemployment and plummeting profits. For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News MoneyWatch reporter Khristopher Brooks. Hi, Khristopher. Great to see you. So what exactly was driving Black entrepreneurship growth in these particular cities, and how significant were the gains?
Well, good afternoon, Tanya. The gains, as you already showed, were significant. To have 56% in Atlanta was fantastic when the state's growth was nowhere near that percentage. And the growth was really driven by, we saw during the pandemic last year that a lot of people, particularly people of color, lost their job when there were state closures. And it seems like a lot of those people took having a paycheck in their own hands and said, I'm going to start my own business to make sure I can have income coming in and I can continue to feed my family and pay my bills.
Can you give us an example of the types of businesses that we're talking about here? Are we talking about delis, car washes? What exactly are we talking about?
Well, Tanya, it really runs the gamut. I spoke to an entrepreneur in Atlanta who last year was actually a middle school teacher, and he stopped doing that altogether, and now he runs a restaurant there where he sells coney dogs and wings. And then I spoke to this woman in Houston where she worked for a nonprofit and left that job, and now she has her own mental health wellness company. So it's a little bit of everything. There was a man in Miami who started a data management company. It's like everything across the board that you can think of.
That is certainly exciting, to hear. It's always exciting to hear when people start new businesses and they take off. What else is this trend telling us? And, now that the pandemic is winding down, will these new entrepreneurs have enough momentum to survive, past the end of COVID-19?
Well, a couple of things. Right. That's the big question, right? Will they be able to stay around past the pandemic? We saw a lot of businesses, Black-owned businesses, close for good during the pandemic, during the height of the pandemic. And at the end of the day, I don't suspect all of the businesses that were created will completely shutter, just like the ones before. But really what this says to us is, as everyone starts to go back to work or try to find a new position and new paychecks, you should really start looking at some of these small businesses that didn't exist prior to the pandemic. There's so many companies being started that were started during the pandemic. They're now hiring now. The company I spoke with, I mentioned the data management company. He has like 7 employees now. There's 10 people working for the Atlanta restaurant I mentioned before. So small business has always been sort of the backbone for like our job market in the country. So that'll continue to take place once we get fully past the pandemic, and those small businesses and those jobs will be people who've started it just now.
And now you spoke with a lot of these entrepreneurs. Do we know if the Paycheck Protection Program contributed to any of this growth, or were these businesses simply too new to be able to qualify for it?
No, it wasn't really the PPP that helped them. I spoke to a researcher who helped me look through these numbers, and really what happened was there was economic stimulus money that Congress expected was going to be used to keep the lights on in your house and pay bills and put food on the table. But in some of those higher income households, they actually took that money and used it to file the new business formation paperwork in their respective states. So it was some government funding by way of the stimulus money, but not necessarily the PPP.
Right. And did the Black Lives Matter movement play a role in helping some of these entrepreneurs start these new businesses?
Yeah, it played a huge role. That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So we also saw in 2020 from the Black Lives Matter movement a ton of attention to existing Black businesses. There were these huge pushes to support Black businesses, and a lot of that carried over into 2021. So there's still a lot of Americans who are specifically focused on making sure they patronize Black businesses. And as that was happening, as these companies got off the ground, they sort of benefited from that because they immediately got customers and clients and everything that they needed to sort of sustain themselves and then continue going into later this year. So it played a huge, huge role, and it's just going to take time to see whether, the second half of this year is going to keep them going in the upward trend.
We certainly wish them the best of luck keeping going with their new endeavors. Khristopher Brooks, thank you so much for joining us and telling us about it.
Thank you, Tanya.